And tonight we are joined by Myron Parks. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going, Tanya?
Good. Tonight we are going to, you are part of the lineup of my series of, The Heart of a Man. And I know we'd spoken in your story. It's very unique to me, at least. And I just thought it was so powerful, intriguing. And I felt that it was essential for the world to hear your story, just for you as a person of the uniqueness that you bring to the table of thinking outside of the box, number one. Number two, the importance of understanding the racial uh, injustices that we experience in this world. And I just thought that you would be a good catalyst to sharing solutions, sharing the problem, and all the rest of that, and bringing your own flavor of experience into it. So I'm going to get started and ask you to share with our audience, like, we have the title, How I Got Out, Leading with Your Heart, Servant Leadership. What does that look like and mean to you?
Yeah, so I'll start with servant leadership. Um, Servant leadership to me is when a person that is responsible for or a team or in general in charge of people or responsible for people uh puts themselves out of the equation and does everything in their power based on the capabilities that they have to support the team. So when I build teams in general, whether they be personal, professional, or academic, I try to maximize the work that we don't do, particularly if it's nonsense and or adds little if any value. But two, to make sure that the people who are on the team have an environment where they can be excellent. So like customizing that environment with an emphasis on providing people with opportunities to shine.
Mm.
Um, and so that's what servant leadership means to me. And so uh getting to the how I got out, well
Let's stop right there because I
oh
like
cool,
that.
thank you.
And I was going to say, sorry, I got to interrupt right here because I missed this bit. You are thinker unscripted.
Uh-huh.
You have your own podcast, Have Fun and Play. You were the head of product at the Black Professional in Tech Network, BPTN.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram under Myron Man P. But what I like about what you said after that whole little thing that I did, the intro that I just did, is that your servant leadership is about allowing you or giving you the opportunity to have other people shine.
Yeah.
And I think that that is powerful, and I think that that is great. So we thank you for that. So,
Oh, you're welcome. And I'll just give you an example. Like today, we had an all hands meeting and um one of the leads like was talking about the commitment that, as a cross functional team, they had seen the junior people on the team performing, and I couldn't help it. I cried a little because I saw the team sticking up for each other
mm,
and unprompted giving each other kudos and supporting each other. And so I think a servant leader is the type of person that creates that. Like it's hard, it's work, it's not luck. You have to burn calories to do it, but you know it when you see it.
mhm.
You
Well,
know it when you see
congratulations. Good.
it.
I commend it. We need more of that coming through in our workforces. So thank you. So let's get into it because this is a story that is worth sharing. We're going to have a great conversation on this one.
Yeah.
So how did you get out? What is getting out? What were you getting out from?
Yeah. So in the vein of creating environments or like looking at the environments for people um to have the opportunity to be excellent. What I got out of was the United States. I actually moved to Canada in 2018 after living in the United States. That's the only country I had ever lived in for all of my life. It was a journey that took me about 10 years. My wife and I about 10 years to do. We came here without jobs, uh, but I saw that, there's a movie called Get Out, and there's this sunken place, and in that movie, this family had had destroyed hundreds of black men in particular, and like of all those hundreds of people, one guy came along that like caught something out of the side of his eye. Like, that's kind of weird right there. Let me focus on that, and that is the way that he kind of got out in that movie. And so, would you mind if I tell you my moment when I kind of caught something out of the side of my? So it's okay. So like, all right, I'm from Chicago. Went to school. Went to like a college prep school, which is super rare in the United States. Um, you
Being
know,
black, going to a
Being
college
yes,
prep school?
being black
Okay.
in particular, went to a college prep school, and my mom, she's a black woman. She worked at a university and did everything to protect us, and a lot of that was be twice as good, don't make any trouble, work three times as hard. You'll be able to be something, but like be safe, like so it's all based on safety, but so like I lived my life, went to the military, honorably discharged, cried during the Proud to Be American song, the whole thing, you know, you know, undergrad university, master's degree university, a third grad school program, and I found that it still wasn't enough. I was still in the sunken place. And so one day, um, in like 1999, so I'm aging myself a little bit, but 1999, after I left the United States in the military, um, I we were in Indiana visiting my mother-in-law, and I was on my way to a short-term contract in Boston. And I was like, well, we're right by this highway, and that highway goes up into Canada. So let's just drive that way and come back down through New York because the traffic enforcement in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and I think there's another one, is just like terrible. Like your trip takes you like three times as long. And so when I travel long distances,
Excuse me.
bless you.
Sorry, thank you.
When I travel long distances, I like to leave at midnight because you follow the sun. It's for me, it's an exploit because I can drive alone. So it was like 2 o'clock in the morning in Ontario, and I stopped to get gas at a truck stop. And so I told my wife I'm going in to use the bathroom. I'll be right out. I go into the bathroom, again, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm a fairly large black guy. So I'm standing at the urinal, and I'm doing my business, like the business is happening, and a white woman walks out of like the toilet stall, and she has like the bucket, so she works there, and she goes, "Hey, good morning, sir. Have a nice day." Makes eye contact and everything. I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, okay, all right, cool. Have a nice day, I guess. And I will be honest with you, Tanya. Um, when I finished using the restroom, I got in the car and spit out of there as quickly as I could. And I like didn't say a word for like several tens of kilometers because I was like looking in the mirrors, and I was like, oh, we're gonna be caught. Like I'm just waiting for the sunken place to happen. And that was the thing that I caught out of the corner of my eye. Like in that movie, I caught the teacup. What's going on
And
with the
I'm like,
teacup over there?
I know when you're telling me this story, I'm like, okay, well, I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it. Right. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, so this lady walks out, it's still a big deal. Like, I just couldn't figure it out until you started to further explain it. So further explain the rationale behind why you were speeding away and saying a speechless, scared, looking in your, rear view mirror. What were you looking for?
Yeah. So it is not normal for a black man who is holding his manhood to be addressed by a white woman late 40s. So we're talking about 1999. So that person was born probably, let's call it 60s. And just be just like a normal, hey, obviously you're doing that because I'm in the restroom because I'm an employee here. in the United States experience, you don't get that. Um, like Emmett Till, whistled at a white woman and was destroyed by the state, right? And so I said the '60s, right? And so and so that's those are things that black men know are really strange. Just
So
like
you're
in that movie.
thinking that you're being set up now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and I hate drawing parallels to like a copyrighted experience, but like if you've seen that movie, and this is the last thing I'll say about that, if you've seen that movie, like the white woman was a key aspect of that movie. And like when he noticed the sort of like the teacup, he was like, wait, there's something going strange in here. And that's how I felt. I was like, I gotta get out of here right now. But during that trip, I noticed that people treated me differently. I couldn't really pin my I couldn't really, put my finger on it, but I was treated differently, more like a human and stuff. And so that began my focus on what the specific difference was. And so over the next, call it decade, I visited Canada. I typically will visit Canada for about 5 days. What I noticed is that the fourth day when I woke up, I was just like a lot less anxious, had a
Mm.
lot less stress. And again, it took me a while to realize it. I was like, the biggest thing about this, because whether I'm in Vancouver or in Toronto or in Montreal, the fourth day when I wake up, I'm just like, I don't know, I feel free almost a little bit, a little freer, you know? And so I set out to to make it more official, to make it permanent. And so that's how I
That's
got out.
well, and I know that we've shared offline conversations, and I still am amazed that in that moment that, and I guess, I'm Canadian, and I get we haven't, and we do have our racial challenges here in Canada, absolutely. Um, However, not to the degree where I'm thinking I'm being set up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thought of when you told me the story, for the audience listening, and when Myron's telling me the story, I'm thinking, well, yeah, why are you speeding away? Like, I'm not getting it. And you're telling me the story as if I'm supposed to catch on
Right. Yeah.
to this. Like, yeah, I'm here in the bathroom and I'm doing my business. And out walks this white lady and just casually says good morning and kid proceeds. And
Right.
I'm like thinking, okay, what's the punchline?
Right. Yeah. 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 And
It's she's cleaning the bathroom. She didn't realize you were there. It was just a miscommunication. Kumbaya, keep moving.
yeah.
And you're like, if I can share with the audience, you realize in that moment that you weren't being set up, and as you started to visit, you realize you had an 80% like greater chance of living to a certain age as a black man in Canada than you did in the United States of America.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's a really important point. So like people ask me, I'll tell you a story, then I'll make that point.
Yeah.
So I actually have a friend that moved to, I moved to Toronto at the same time that my friend moved to the South, to a very friendly city to black people, Atlanta. And, like similarly, it was like, all right, well, it can't be that, how could it be that? Well, Atlanta compared to Chicago is like way more friendly. It's basically the same thing. And I was like, okay, all right, well, that's possible. I've never been there. So, it's possible. But when, the company I worked at, hired people from that city, I had that conversation with a black gentleman on the Friday before he left. So he had been in Canada for like 4 or 5 days. And he was like, yo, Byron, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know, like I was walking around Dundas Square and I just felt like I was free. And I'm like, yo, this dude is from that city. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, it's like confirmed. Um, um, but like, so friends will ask me, right? I'm iron. So like, how much less racist? 'Cause people like integers, and I go, look, I think it's about 80% less racist. Like my career skyrocketed when I came here. Same guy, same credential, give or take. Career skyrocketed.
And what do you think the difference is now that you've lived in both worlds? I'm Canadian. I've only lived here. So to me, what we go through is normal. You know,
Right.
when you go, and I know I've spoken to, you know, Americans over time, and when they hear our racial stories, uh, they're in jaw drop. Like, what? That's it? And it's like,
Right.
well, it's, you know, a problem is a problem, right? It's still our challenge over here. We haven't experienced it to the degree that you. So, what is the difference now that you have experienced both worlds?
I think while my understanding is that slavery existed in Canada as well, but like even in chattel slavery times, and this is something that we don't get exposure to in the United States for hashtag reasons, but most people don't know that Harriet Tubman actually came to Canada. And so, all right, so like, all right, okay, cool. So if the premise is that Harriet Tubman way back then was like Underground Railroad goes to Ontario, then I'm like, all right, done. Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean,
Right.
okay, like what we're taught in the United States is that like the Underground Railroad was like good and like a bunch of like slaves were free and they like went up north. But no, but like we literally never learned that Harriet Tubman ever went into Canada. And so like I mean, and they were escaping chattel slavery, like even back then. And you know, my understanding is that it wasn't super awesome up here either, but it was they were probably like, look, it's 80% better than
Right.
like being cattle. You know what I'm saying?
So you're now okay. I get it now. Like fast forward a year, like hundreds, like many years later, and you're like decades later, and you're like, okay, it's
Yeah.
still 80%. It's still 80% better.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you know, like another example is when I'm in the States and I get pulled over by a police officer, it's ingrained in me that it's a coin toss. 50-50 I'm destroyed by the state. In the United States as a black man, particularly a black man that knows a little bit and challenges or speaks power, truth to power, anyone could terminate my life and get away with it. That's just the reality.
Have you ever been pulled over by the police in Canada?
Yes, as a matter of fact. And the
Okay.
experience is very different. There's a lot of I'm sorry, sirs, the license plate has been expired like 6 months, and I'm gonna be giving you this ticket because this is what this means, and my apologies. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt your day. I know that you're pretty busy, but you know I have to do this because of X, Y, and Z. No one comes to the car with their gun out in my face. Where are you going? Now, I know that there are different areas of Canada that does happen. Does happen. But my premise is 80% less. So like in Chicago, like or in the South, every time it was gun out, where are you going? Where do you live? Uh step out of the car. Do you have any weapons in it? You look like someone I know. Well,
So the
but you
drawing the parallel, even our police officers, you know, Canadians, that we have this stigma of being overly polite and apologetic, and you're being pulled over and they're apologizing to you for pulling you over and interrupting your
yeah.
day.
And like explaining and so like explaining like I don't know, like the due process. Like here's what happens. Here's what this means. Here's blah blah blah. And it stands out to me because I don't know any of the rules. Like I'm a permanent resident in Canada, and you know just the reality is like you don't have to take a written test about like the rules. Like you're just here and you rely on the society to inform you of the things you need to be informed of.
Right.
Uh, you know, so I'm fairly certain that they're not giving me perfect knowledge, but as a person that lived in the United States my entire life, up until this moment, uh, there's no sense of due process. Now, my wife, she's Caucasian, and when she's pulled over by the police, she can say stuff like, "You're an a hole. Why are you doing this? I don't have time for this." and not be destroyed by the state agents.
And, I have to be very authentic and transparent in this moment. It Listening to your story, it makes me appreciate um, the way that we are treated should we get pulled over by a police officer here in Canada. We've just grown up in a system that this is just normal for us. Um, and, definitely after listening to your story firsthand, not just seeing it in the media, but really getting to intimately experience you sharing that story, it definitely has woken me up and given me a whole new level of appreciation for how we experience our life over here as Black people over here in Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. And
So,
so I gave you some background on like sort of like some examples of like those moments where I noticed that there were things that were done better. And at the end of the day, after a long, thorough process, and seeing some writing from like James Baldwin, it dawned on me that James Baldwin, for example, is James Baldwin because he did not stay in the United States. That's a really important thing that no one in the
talk
United States, or hardly anyone in the United States, is either focuses on or is enlightened of the knowledge of. Both Harriet Tubman, and James Baldwin were Harriet Tubman and James Baldwin because they got out of the United States.
mm,
Huh. I want. So maybe from a servant leadership perspective, I should create an environment for me to be safe, and then I get to choose what I do with the rest of my life. Maybe.
mm. It's quite something. It's quite something. So basically, what I hear is I have to put my oxygen mask on
Yeah.
because I'm not breathing.
Yeah. Absolutely. You
I'm
got to
living
put your mask
fear.
on first.
Right. Um, what was that experience like when all of a sudden now you have to present it to your wife? We're getting out. Your family. You're coming to. You said you came here no job. You're coming to
Yeah.
a country you don't know anyone. Walk me through that a decision process
Mm.
and how it affected the relationships around you
Yeah.
making that decision.
I think for me, for my wife and I think the first thing that made it an easier proposition is that I was in the Navy, and we both moved from, I personally moved from like Chicago to like Northern Illinois to Florida and then to San Diego, California. And my wife moved with me to San Diego, California. So we had a leg up. We knew how to move large regional distances. And so we were deciding, frankly, um, I was just actually in the last stages of my school psychology, and thinking about where I would do my practicum and or my internship, and I was like, why not Hawaii? You know what I'm saying? And so, uh, we've traveled a lot, and my wife was like, yo, like, why don't we move somewhere warm? And I was like, well, you know what? This thing that I've been thinking about. Now we are cool doing large regional moves, so that's not a barrier. So why don't we try Canada for this, and this reason? I was like, okay, all right, well, cool. How are we gonna do it? I was like, well, I know that the whole visa thing, like being uh beholden to an organization, that's not something I'm willing to do. So I used a skilled worker program. And what that did is that bought me, because I went part time to get my bachelor's degree to get enough points. So that bought me 5 years to make sure it was what we wanted to do. So started working on my bachelor's degree and visiting Canada for at least 1 week every single year to make sure that it wasn't like, oh, actually Wonderland's there, and like most people are like, you know, used to like serving tourists, especially when they hear the American accent. And so like, because there's people are frankly people are spending U.S. dollars, right? That matters. Okay, so all right, okay, cool. So I need to go to different places in Canada for the next 5 years, at least 1 year, one week. Because remember the 4 day rule. I need to make sure that no matter where I go, I wake up and I'm like, because the body knows. You know what I'm saying? So okay,
Absolutely.
so all right, so make sure that I wasn't just like I wasn't in
And
like
the grass wasn't greener on the other side, right?
yes, yes, yes. So
Or the
then
grass
when I
was greener, sorry, but the grass is greener on the other side.
yes, yes. So I wanted to make sure because okay, so like if you ever been to Disney World, have you been to Disney World?
Yes.
Okay, Disney World is like in Florida, but like when you get on Disney World, you're like in space. Like it's a highly accelerated like human civilization. It is not Florida, but as soon as you walk off the park, it is. And so I needed to make sure that that wasn't what I was experiencing.
Mhm.
When I finished with my bachelor's degree and I was trying to go as an IT skilled worker, it was like, yo, actually 5 years ago you were good, but like now there's like a 10-year waiting line. So then my wife, she's an insurance underwriter. So she went and got her degree. So that took 3 years part time. So again, so now this 8 years, we were just, boom. All right, Montreal. Okay, all right, cool. We're gonna go to like this part of Vancouver, this part of British Columbia, and we just visited all over.
And
Okay, all
tell
right,
me,
you know.
was our temperature the same right across Canada? Were we consistent?
Well, so like on the West Coast, because we lived in California for a while, so like the West Coast was basically like the West Coast, maybe a little cooler. But like Toronto like was just like Chicago, so like I wasn't afraid of like the atmospheric temperature. So it was fairly consistent, consistent with my expectations. Um and so that was 3 more years of visiting. So now we're at 8 years. And then we get down to the wire and it's like, okay, all right, so let's take an agile approach to this. Let's get all the documentation done and let's get our permanent residents because all you have to do is go for one of our normal visits anyway to land and have our attorney mail it to us. So we got our permanent residence and was like, okay, all right, cool. So we have 5 years to live there for 2 years. So let's uh again let's continue like evaluating the hypothesis that it will be better for both of us because it's better for me specifically
Mhm.
to live there.
Right.
That's a really important piece. It's better for me to live there, so it's better for us.
Mhm.
Um, and so the year that we planned to come was 2016.
And
We
that
had
got delayed
planned,
a little bit, right?
huh?
That there was a delay in that.
Well, so we actually planned to come out here in like September because we landed like in October. So we wanted all right. We wanted to wait to the last possible second, but like like the United States government turned a certain way, and we were like, yeah, let's. There's no reason to wait, so let's just get it.
Okay.
Let's go.
Now, do you find that, like, I believe Ontario or Toronto, particularly, is probably one of the most multicultural, diverse places to live in the world?
Yeah,
Do you think that that plays a contributing factor into the 80% more likely chance to live to a certain age as a Black man?
I think
And
so. Yeah, I think so. So we actually thought about all right. Well, where do we want to live? So if we wanted to do the sort of like me lead with the IT angle, it was absolutely West Coast. But we were like, okay, but the financial center is there. My wife is who got like is the skilled professional that we're here for, and we want to make sure that if the rules change for any reasons, they probably won't, but if the rules change, we want to be able to make sure that we are in the financial center, so that she will always have a job. West Coast would be she would probably have to change fields a little bit, and it would be a little sketchy. But again, I tend to think about these things in the long term. So we're talking about 12 years ish. And I was like, okay, I want to make sure that she's going to always be able to get work in the financial center. But also, the reality is on the West Coast, is like 0.01% Black people. And, that was a consideration. I was like, look, I want to make sure. And we walked around a bunch of different places. And we felt comfortable, frankly, walking down the street holding hands in Toronto. That was really important.
And that again, I believe somebody can Google it and research, anybody in the audience, but I believe that Toronto is the most multicultural, diverse place in all of the world, of most mixed ethnicities in the world. I believe Toronto is. I want to know what it was like when you were now presenting this idea to your relatives, your family. I'm leaving, and this is the reason why. What was that like?
So, one of the key things that I didn't mention was, so I did mention the fact that I was like, hey, uh, we should leave because my life will be better there and your life will be better there. I didn't get there automatically. That wasn't an initial part of the plan. The initial part of the plan was let's try it out and see what happens. I mean, we tried Florida a little bit, we tried San Diego a little bit. Let's try that for a little bit. About 6 years ago, I was working at a company, and a friend of mine that studied critical race theory. If you've ever seen this movie called They Live, and I'm sorry, I keep using movie analogies, but there's a movie where there's an alien race that's taken over the world, and they have this technology where regular humans can't see what's happening. Only the aliens can. Only at one point, the protagonist is handed a pair of sunglasses that shows him what's actually going on. And so, if this gentleman picked up a magazine that was like a Sports Illustrated or something like that, it looked like just like a regular Sports Illustrated, just like cars and like people talking about sports or whatever. But when the sunglasses come down, it says stuff like obey, no original thought, procreate, don't ask questions, do what you're told. It's an amazing analogy. The movie's called They Live. A friend of mine handed me those sunglasses, and I couldn't go back.
Mm.
It was my first exposure to what was happening from an anti-racist perspective, and so that was really important content to cover the family side. My family still doesn't understand fully why someone would just leave the United States because of something that simple, especially uh, someone who's doing so well. And I want to make sure framing this in a way that is not, no one is upset with me, and I'm not upset at them. For me, it's a matter of understanding and observation of what's going on. In my mind, I don't believe that ignorance is a negative thing. You don't know what you don't know, and so disbelief is a key part of it. That work is hard. Like
Mhm.
the work of realizing for the first time that Harriet Tubman, this person that you heard about, actually went to Canada. Most black people aren't taught that or know that in the United States. Most black people in the United States don't know that only about 300,000 slaves went to the United States, and like millions went everywhere else.
Mm.
Most black people, because as Americans, and I'm generalizing, but we are known for not knowing geography very well.
Well, Canadians were always, and I know because I frequent the US a lot, and it was always like, you were from the you're from England, right? And I said,
Right,
no.
right. And like this idea of like the West Indies. Like we don't like like my friend that like was in a PhD program had to tell me about the West Indies. And so we don't understand these things. And so
Right,
it's
because
very,
most Black Canadians are of West Indian heritage,
yeah,
whereas I find most Black Americans are lineage of slavery
mhm,
coming down, generational Americans, where we are generational West Indians.
yeah, absolutely.
And that was a huge, and in your world, like, I'd go to the US and they just thought we were Black generational Americans.
Yeah.
So when I would speak to Americans, they couldn't understand, what do you mean West Indian? It's more known now. We're talking, I'm going to age myself. We're talking, back in the late 70s, early 80s. it was like, what do you mean? Um, and then on the flip side, when Americans came over and you were Black American, it was like, well, where are your parents from? What island are they from? And they're
Right.
like, they're American. My grandparents are American. It was just foreign to us to even think that you could be generational Americans. It was like, no, you've got to be West Indian.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the kind of thing. And so disbelief, right?
Mhm.
Disbelief. But I think the disbelief is driven from like just real talk. Um, when you have those kinds of conversations, people go, "Oh," get real quiet
Right.
because most people haven't dealt with that.
Right.
Like every black person that I've met uh, in Canada or from Canada knows exactly where their grandmother is from. Like they've been there. Like they have their
You're
their
absolutely right.
their legacy, their history, their ancestry. And that right there, I think, is a big thing. Like when I talk to people very close to me, my family, I say, "Hey, look, I'm here because of racism." They're going, that's not that big a deal." Like, I mean, all you gotta do is just, you know, it's not a big deal. You know what? I'll tell you racism. Like, I'll give you examples of racism. Like, what you experienced was not racism. And I'm like, all right, well, that's just super unsafe. And so I'd rather be safe, a lot, like 80% safer, and then decide what I want to spend the rest of my life on. Like, maybe I didn't want to be an activist, so I don't have to be.
I still am amazed by your story. I want to talk about a little bit here when it comes to um, eh, giving back to the community. So you've now left the United States, understanding it. You know, you obviously have demonstrated in this conversation that, again, putting on your own oxygen mask, being able to do something more on with your oxygen mask over here. How do you contribute, or do you give back and help the Black community in the United States of America from this end?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question. I think what so there are two things that I consider ways of giving back to the community. The first is I've accepted that the black community, at least for me, is more connected to the African diaspora, and the things that we can do for the African diaspora are beneficial to most people in North America. So that's the first way that I go about it. The second way I go about it is essentially I really enjoy working and building remote teams or distributed teams. And so every opportunity that I have, I talk with people, whether they be allies or black professionals, or hire allies or black professionals, and create an environment for a culturally relevant environment with like the most qualified people possible. And generally speaking, when you see my teams represent the data. The reality is that women get most degrees, most credentials, and women of color are the most qualified people in the known universe.
Hmm.
And so when I build teams, the second I open up administratively, hiring distributed teams or remote teams from anywhere, that's what the activity tends to wind up looking like. The third thing, and I'll add a third thing is I actively mentor and coach black professionals, no matter where they are in their career. I offer sponsorship, mentorship, and coaching. And in the practice that I do, or when I do mentor people, or when I do sponsor people from that perspective, I keep in mind the things that they're missing out on. That informs the way that I work with people specifically.
Mhm. All right. What I'm thinking to myself when you said sponsorship, I'm like, hey, are you sponsoring everybody to move to Canada? Is that what
I
that was the
wish.
first thing that came to my mind. And did you feel that it was harder for you to deal with the system in America, um, where it sounds selfish for me to frame it like this, or unselfish? I'm not sure which one, depending on whoever's receiving it. But it was almost like idea that I had to save myself because the system was too big for me to fight, and I wasn't prepared for that type of fight.
Yeah, yeah, and so like for me, I think that So there's a narrative, right? Work twice as hard, get half as much, but like the acceptance of that as being normal.
Mhm.
The pride that comes from being more excellent than anyone else, but just making it by. I think that that's a crappy existence. I want to be in an empowering a space where mediocre people with hard effort can get ahead. And I felt that after living there for so long, that the system is so rigged, and or no one is willing to do the real work to create a space for people to live their best lives.
Mm.
And so I found it was very important. So for me, it is that I have refused to support a system like that with my productivity.
Oh, got it.
So I took a stand and I was like, look, so here's what I'm not going to do anymore. I'm not going to personally contribute to that system
Mm.
at all, ever again. That is my so yes, I put my mask on first, but I'm supporting Black people or everywhere in the known universe by not supporting a system like that.
Mm. That's actually, say that again. Let me let me grasp that.
Yeah,
I think that what you just said is very, it's big.
yeah, yeah. So like, I felt that from a quality of life perspective, yes, I was moving myself out of that so I can live a more full life. But in order to, at the same time, in order to support Black people, the African diaspora, any a diaspora anywhere in the known universe, it was really important for me to not support with my dollars, my effort, my productivity, my thought, my spirit, that
Mm.
system.
We vote with our dollar, right?
Absolutely.
I audience, please listen to that statement. He said it twice. I think that it's huge. It's really really big. And not everybody can do what you did, or do you feel that everybody can do what you did?
I would say that everyone can't do it the way that I did it. However, um, there's a certain number of people that can actually move across state lines that have upward mobility. So if we're looking at the large group of Black people or people of color in the United States and other places in the world that can do that, moving over the border or choosing to not contribute to systems like these. Some systems are smaller than like the federal government of the United States, right? So like, I'm not saying that everyone should choose a system that large to speak power to or to disinvest from. But I would say, in the spirit of sort of like Ibram X. Kendi, anti-racism, right? Everyone has a level of power, and you choose whether to be anti-racist or support racist systems every single day. Each one of us
So
can
then, how
choose.
does, I guess the defining question for me that's in my mind is, I'm watching this show, I'm seeing you, I'm hearing your story, I'm in the system. There's no hope for me in this moment to get out. How do I get out? And you may
That's a
not
really
be
good
able to
question.
answer that because that's a loaded question, but
Yeah,
that's what comes to my mind is, how do you get out? How do I get out? Well, what do I have to do in
right.
order to get out? You know,
Yeah,
and we've talked about this, that not everybody's coming from neighborhoods that the system is set up for them to thrive.
yeah,
Um, and thriving, even if you have the desire to thrive, the work that it's going to take, like what you have to go through, is not that easy. And I'm only basing it on media.
yeah,
I don't even know the hardcore facts.
yeah. It's very difficult to do. Um, but what I would say is this: start where you can.
Mm.
So I knew for sure that I was gonna at least try it, sort of like in a spirit of agility. We're at least gonna try for like 2 years, and it may not be good. It may suck. But it took 12 years. But what I
Oh,
did is,
exit plan.
you know what I'm saying. But what I did is like every month or all right, okay, cool. I'm gonna get this bachelor's degree, and I'm gonna link it to other goals. I'll have a bachelor's degree whether I go or not. right? And then, okay, I'm gonna go get a master's degree because whether I go or not, I have a master's degree, and that like improves all these other things. So figure out what you can do to disinfest from systems that hate you, or may not just, or may just not really like you.
Okay. All right. You make it sound easy. I know you said it's not easy.
Right, right. It's not easy, but I mean, just just
Do
start today.
it. Did you ever feel like, or have it projected to you that you were betraying your people? And I shouldn't even say it like this, so forgive me for saying it like that. But we've had offline where it's like, and I say your people, meaning your friends, your family. Did you ever feel like, or was it ever projected to you that you betrayed them?
I wouldn't say betray, but like
And I don't
I've heard,
just yeah, your close community.
yeah, yeah. So it's so like the words are not as like there are different ways to like express the feeling, but the feeling is that you're running away. You're running
No.
away, and there may be cowardice there, but you're running away and you're not fighting with us. And
What did they think you were running away from?
running away from the fight.
Okay.
Like you're you're not brave enough, or like you're running away. But I will tell you this: I tend to like my personal brand is Thinker Unscripted, and I came to that because I have a knack for evaluating systems very quickly and seeing very far out things that most people don't see as problems. I'm figuring out how to solve them, and so I've had people who are very senior level administrators, executives, tell me stuff like, "Well, why are you running away? Like, why are you giving up? Why are you giving up?" 3 years later, those same people are like, "Yo, you know what? Like you're right. Like, like, yo, like."
Well, 'cause I'm thinking to myself, I think it's more bravery and courageous because I know in my circle, my people would be like exactly that. You're running, you're this, you're betraying us, you're leaving us, this, that, and everything else. And I think it takes a lot of courage. Was it not in the same context, but I think it was Tiffany Haddish that had made a point where as she was climbing, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but something to the effect that as she was rising, she couldn't take everybody at the same time with her. But she said
Right.
she'd go back. She goes, I'll come back. Don't worry about it. But I
Yeah.
can only take so amount at a time. And it's kind of like that. It's brave. I've got to take that step because I'm an unscripted thinker and I'm an out of box thinker. I'm a creative thinker. And I'm going before everybody, but don't worry, I'm coming back.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's in the spirit of like putting your mask on first, or like you get your oxygen first, all right? So you figure out and you spot a problem, or you're going through some problems, and you go, all right, well, what can I do? All right, well, for me, like I can probably do this really far out thing, so I'll do that. But like for the average person, like figure out what you can do.
Hmm.
Maybe do something different. Maybe
Hmm.
run an experiment. Maybe challenge your expectations, or challenge, your environment, or like what is normal.
Hmm.
Um, in the United States in particular, like the entire, there was an insurrection attempt. You know what I'm saying? Like these are these are things that are instrumental in people being like, yo, you know what? Like, yo, you might be right. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's uh so we have an immense opportunity right now for people to be like, you know what? Well, what can I do locally? What can I do like, like this supermarket right here? Like maybe I don't have to like even as that simple. I don't have to shop here.
Mm.
So it depends on what you can do, but figure out like what you want. Like where are you putting your mask on first today?
Hmm. It's pretty eye opening, I got to say, for Canadians, because I'm like outside of the race aspect of it, even raising a family. For anybody watching the show in Canada, depending on the province you're from, we call it provinces, you guys call it states. Depending on the province you're from, as a woman, when you have a child, the government pays you to stay at home. Well, you pay into the system, but you're financially taken care of, and you get up until 18 months home with your child with your job protected. So you cannot, unless the company goes under, you can't lose your job. You keep your job. So when Canadians were hearing that we were, women were only getting 3 months off with a good job, we were
Yeah.
like, what?
Yeah.
Women over here were listening in. We were completely shocked because for us, we get a year off, and in some provinces, you get 2 years off with
Yeah.
support from the government with job security upon the end of that maternity term.
Yeah.
So it's just listening to, and as you said, we talked about it before, black, like us being Black Canadians, we're West Indian descent. So being West Indian descent, yes, so where your grandmother or your great grandparents' house was on the island,
Yeah.
and you're related to the whole island.
Yeah.
You're over here, so I'm sure you've spoken to them, and you're related to the whole island, where it's just such a different experience and different. Simply put, a different experience in the United States of America that Canadians are learning every day. We are learning a lot more of because we're not exposed to it. And I don't mean
Right.
from the experience perspective, from the educational perspective, because we're not being taught it even in the institution, in the educational system,
Right.
um, as you would be over there in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, like for anyone that's like watching, and because okay, so like there's like different phases to acceptance. I like to use the uh the uh the grief model, like Dada, right? Anyone who's like in the sort of like, denial or like bargaining, well, I mean, maybe it's like there's literally a black woman on, what is it, $10, it's a $20 bill, right?
Yes, yes.
There's literally a black woman on the
On our
$20 bill,
$10 bill
the
as the
$10
first,
bill, sorry.
yeah, our the Canadian $10 bill for anybody watching, our Canadian $10 bill has the first Black woman on our $10 bill.
Yeah. And that was like 4 years ago.
The
Uh,
Olympians.
you know what I'm saying? And so like I remember like I was in the States and like I've actually like given black people, particularly black young people, like tips with like a $10 Canadian dollar bill and like with notes like it can be better. Like you know what I'm saying? Like there's like, like
Right. We're leading the way. We're leading the way. Canadians are leading the way.
I mean, but like one of the things that's really key though is I say 80%, right? So like it's not perfect, but no place is. So
Mhm.
I want it's really important to note that no one's saying that things are perfect because we're dealing with people and people are inherently flawed, right?
Mhm.
So there's no panacea. It's very
Right.
difficult to get a job when frankly w- when you're American and like you literally talk about it our we I'm going to generalize here, but we are generally a lot more comfortable talking about death and like guns to heads and like that's just like normal conversation. And so it's challenging to sort of inspect and adapt to a new culture, but it's about making a decision on what you're willing to change today. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to be big. It can be small. But what are you willing to do to change the systems, like to actively change the systems that you interact with? And
And
that's
as
what I
you
would
said,
say.
that's simple as choosing where to vote with your dollar simply by the grocery store you're shopping at,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
where you're buying your clothes from,
Yeah.
or just those simple basic, those basic things that we can. And I don't even think they're basic. I think that they're big.
Right. And like from a support perspective, when I was handed those sunglasses, I had to go to therapy to figure it out. Anyone who's listening to this that is black that may think, oh, it's probably not a big deal. There may be a point where it sinks in and you realize that like your ancestry was taken from you.
Mm.
And that is a moment that is very difficult to go through by yourself. It just is. If you saw the movie Black Panther and you cried, because in the scenes where they talked about like we were left behind, there's some stuff there to unpack. Because when you interact with people from the African diaspora, just who are not from the United States, they have their entire ancestry, and that's very difficult. It's going to be very difficult for you.
And I just want to understand what I'm hearing from you because maybe I'm missing something. Would you say that most Black Americans are not able to really place their ancestry?
Yes,
Okay. I didn't know that. That's
yeah, that's a dirty
profound.
secret. That's a dirty secret. That's a dirty little secret right there.
And how far generationally would you say it goes back? Like 3 generations, 4 generations?
I would say probably like 4 or 5 generations.
Okay.
Yeah. So like if you can figure out how to get past like 1820, you'll find it. But
Hmm.
like make no mistake, like so like if you're looking at like financially like adjusted for inflation over 400 years, there were trillionaires working like burning calories every day to hide that information.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. I learned a lot this evening, right? I think I'm part of the audience.
Now, in from a learning perspective, I'm not an expert. I've had really really cool people point me to books, but like if you're black and you're in the United States, ask your mom who your grandmother and grandfather was, and who your great grandmother and great grandfather was. You will be surprised at how whispery and shady it gets very quickly.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for being here this evening. We got a couple minutes left, and I thank you for sharing your story. This is the first time we talked that you came out openly and you're sharing this story. So thank you for being brave to share your story, being so candid about it as well. Um, Thank you for your leadership and thinking out of the box. I've said to you before that you are an out of box thinker and just having the desire to teach people how to shine. I want to remind the audience where they can follow you, find you, and be inspired, continue to be inspired by you, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Myron Man P. Also on your podcast, Have Fun and Play. And also, if you look at BPTN, uh, on, is it bptn.com, is it?
BPTN.ca.
.ca.
Yes.
You will find Myron there as well. He's the head of product. It's the Black Professional in Tech Network.
Yeah.
So thank you again for joining us this evening.
You're welcome, Tanya. I was so happy to be here.
Thank you. Your first time. I'm honored. I'm deeply honored and touched. I'm Tanya Ricketts, your host. Visit me tomorrow where we will be joined by Tanya Smith and Teresa Simpatico. We will be discussing the infinite power of source energy, tapping into the infinite power of source energy. You can also follow me on Instagram and Facebook under the Tanya Experience and Tanya Talks 4. And you can also visit thetanyaexperience.com if you want to work with me one-on-one to take your life to the next level. All right, everyone, have a good evening. Thank you for tuning in. And Myron, thank you again for being here with us this evening. Good night.